welcome to the Dark Origins of Disney, a series where I, your host Ebony, deep dive into the original fables that your favourite Disney stories derived from. This is a 10-part series focusing on some of the most well-loved children's tales spanning across the years, as well as a bonus episode at the end of the series focusing on Disney as a whole, the company, and Walt Disney himself. Disclaimer: this is an origin story series and will not be focusing on the current backlash surrounding the new live-action films. Also, spoilers ahead. With that being said, my name is Ebony, this is the Film Spark podcast, and you're listening to episode 6 of the Dark Origins of Disney series, Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a fictional character and the protagonist of the children's novel The Adventures of Pinocchio, written by Carlo Collodi in 1883. It follows the story of Pinocchio, who was carved by a woodcarver named Geppetto in a Tuscan village. He is created as a wooden puppet, but he dreams of becoming a real boy. He is known for his long nose, which grows when he lies. Pinocchio is a cultural icon and one of the most reimagined characters in history. His story has been adapted into many other media, notably the 1940 Disney film Pinocchio. The name Pinocchio is possibly derived from the rare Tuscan form Pinocchio, meaning pine nut, or constructed from Pino, meaning pine tree, and Occhio, meaning eye. When Walt Disney Productions was developing the story for their film version of Pinocchio in 1940, they intended to keep the obnoxious aspects of the original character. But Walt Disney himself felt that this made the character too unlikable, so alterations were made to incorporate traits of mischief and innocence to make Pinocchio more likable. Pinocchio was voiced by Dickie Jones. Today, the film is considered one of the finest Disney features ever made, and one of the greatest animated films of all time. In the video game adaptation of the film, Pinocchio lives out mostly the same role as the film, traveling through the world filled with temptations and experiencing various forces. Trouble from the beginning, the Pinocchio in the original Italian fairy tale is set up for failure. Rather than a loving man wishing for a son, Geppetto is the impoverished neighbour of a carpenter who donated a talking hunk of wood to him. Geppetto carves what was meant to be a new leg for the neighbour's dining table. Perhaps that would have been better time spent. Pinocchio goes from adventure to adventure, gambling away money, being duped repeatedly by the same conspiring duo, and failing to be the son Geppetto had always dreamed of. In fact, the reader first meets a talking cricket who's lived in the puppeteer's house for a century when he warns Pinocchio against being a bad boy. Unhappy with his words, Pinocchio throws a hammer at the cricket, killing it. So there goes Jiminy's storyline. After he runs away from his master, Pinocchio gets into all kinds of violent scrapes. He narrowly escapes being thrown into a fire as fuel for a cooking hungry puppeteer's dinner. A fisherman coats him in flour and tries to fry him. But most shockingly of all, at one point, Pinocchio is lynched from a tree by his recurring enemies the fox and the cat. Collodi actually ended his original Pinocchio magazine series with the wooden boy being hung, until popular demand for his revival prompted the writer to find a way out for the puppet protagonist. Another shocking detail that changed that is potentially creepier and more obscene than the original story is the renaming of Collodi's Toyland as Pleasure Island. In the original story, Pinocchio runs away with a friend he meets on the way to school to Toyland, a place where you never have to work. They simply spend the next 5 months playing every day. In the film, the things the boys get up to are considerably more adult-themed and perhaps a 1940s way of teaching boys that gambling, smoking, and drinking are bad. The worst element that differs between the book and the film version is arguably the scene where Pinocchio and his friend begin to turn into donkeys, because of their careless adventures in Pleasure Island. What Disney doesn't show you is that Collodi had Pinocchio turn fully into a donkey. As such, he is sold to a man who tries to kill the donkey by drowning him in the sea so that he can be skinned. However, fish eat the flesh of the donkey and Pinocchio escapes from the carcass, as well as the evil man. Even if the story was aimed at adults, some might agree that the original Italian tale is not for sensitive audiences. That brings us to the end of episode 6, Pinocchio. Again, my name is Ebony, this is the Film Spark podcast, and join us next time for episode 7, The Hunchback of Notre Dame.